Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live with CXPA. I'm your host for today's program, Gabe Smith, CCXP. I'm the content manager for the Customer Experience Professionals Association. So hard to believe that we're already in the third month of the year. So welcome everyone to this live stream. Welcome everyone to the month of March. This is the first of 5 live stream broadcasts that CXPA is going to be holding this month. So if you're not sick of seeing my face just yet, just give it some time. Excited to be with you today to welcome today's panelists and discuss today's topic of advancing CX in the Asia Pacific region. And first, I want to bring on a guest that I know none of you are tired of hearing from, and that is Mr. Greg Melia, CAE, the CEO of CXPA. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, Gabe. And you're living up to telling people things they probably don't agree with already. It's nice to have controversy on a show.
A little fake news to get us started. Yeah, absolutely. Greg, I know this is a chance for us, and it's a chance for our audience to hear more about the work of CX in the Asia Pacific region. So I want to ask you 2 questions. One, what are you excited to share with our viewing audience today? And what are you excited to learn more about yourself today?
Yeah. So what's really kind of cool and exciting about today is that we're not only going to hear about CX in the Asia Pacific region and talk about how you can get involved. We're also going to be demonstrating something that I think is really at the core of CX, no matter where you are in the world. And that is the power of partnership. When you look at CXPA, we have members in 70 countries around the world. And we're only successful in engaging our members and engaging new people because of the work of our network leaders and because of the work of our partners. So it's really exciting to see that. But that's not just about us. If you really think about it, being a CX leader is being about influencing the people that work in your organization that don't directly report to you. It's about building those partnerships. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to learn more about these partnerships as well and bring our guests on. But before I do that, as you all know, in the viewing audience, I always like to learn where you are tuning in from today. So please take a second, put your location into the comments section. We would love to hear from you. We always love to see all the global engagement, whether you're watching us on YouTube, whether you're watching us on LinkedIn or Facebook. We want to hear from you. And throughout today's broadcast, please, if you have questions or comments that you want to share to help spur our discussion that we can stop and address, we want to hear those too. This program, I think, is at its best when we get to hear from the global CX community. So please put your comments in the chat box, and we will do our best to make sure that we are answering those questions as we go. So I'd like to welcome our guest to today's program without further ado. First, I'd like to welcome Dr. Francis Goh, CCXP. He's based in Singapore. Francis is the founder and CEO of Hehsed Consulting, a digital and innovation company that assists clients in their digital transformation journey. Our next guest is Dr. Anil Pillai. Anil is based in India. He is the director of Terragni Consulting. Drawing on neuroscience and behavioral science, Terragni is dedicated to solving complex human engagement challenges that organizations face. Welcome to Francis and Anil.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gabe.
Hey, Gabe, before we get too far along, I just wanted to check in. Are we connected? Are we connected over to LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm getting a message saying that there's some trouble streaming to LinkedIn and that it may be an issue on LinkedIn's end. So I did see that looks like we had some viewers on YouTube and Facebook. So if you're watching, would love to hear from you, just if nothing else to make sure that we're in fact broadcasting. So go ahead and hit us up in the comments. We'll give it just a second here.
Sorry, everyone, for this little technical space. This is a first bump in the road.
This is a new one.
as we've had a number of different spaces.
Yeah. It looks like there's no trouble with YouTube and Facebook from what I'm seeing here. And I know that we're recording the broadcast. So, folks aren't able to tune in live to LinkedIn. We can certainly reshare this, at another time.
Excellent. I'll
Okay.
go. I'm going to jump back into the waiting room, if you allow me to, and rejoin you guys in a moment. You guys get started on the conversation. I can go drop a note to our friends on LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and Gabe, perhaps it may be a good idea for you to just leave the YouTube link on the chat here, so that if somebody comes by on StreamYard, they can actually see the YouTube link.
Yep, absolutely. Greg, you want to take care of that one as well?
I will do that. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I'll get us going on the conversation.
Awesome.
All right, see you in a bit, Greg. Anil, Francis, welcome to the broadcast. Thanks for bearing with us through the technical challenges. I want to get started. Francis, I'm going to start with you. And just generally, if you could speak on what are some of the trends that you're seeing related to CX in the Asia Pacific region?
Well, I think it's a reflection about the expectations that the customers have. In Asia, I see a huge amount of clients expecting speed, a lot of speed in terms of the response, and the expectations for services and product deliveries are extremely high. So essentially, basically, the momentum and the rhythm of business is very high in Asia. So it translates into the expectations of customers, and that builds a lot of pressure on brands and products and services. And as you know, to deliver something quickly with good quality, that pressure will add on further down the line across all the verticals.
Yeah. Anil, I'm curious your reaction. Francis talked about pressure and expectation. Is that something that you're seeing in India as well?
So, a while back, a few months back, we did a study of the state of CX across the region. And we spoke to, I think, a fairly large bunch of CEOs, managing directors of companies across different industries. And it's very interesting what came out. For example, 86% of CEOs wanted their CX teams to connect to business outcomes. 75% of CEOs believe the CX function needs a higher business exposure. So this is really what internal managements want. As far as customers are concerned, there is no one customer in India. There are many Indias, and there's significant upward mobility. So there's a significant demand on a better experience, and people are now benchmarking even in B2B, for example, with an Amazon. So people are now getting exposed to a very large, very high benchmark with regards to experience. And I think to echo what Francis mentioned, the customer is demanding, but the demand is across the intensity of the demand differs depending on which segment or which India you're talking to.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I want to get both of your insights. Francis, I want to come back to you around this to continue building on this idea of customer expectations. Is there a difference in the Asia Pacific region that you're seeing there? Where you may see something different elsewhere in the world, and does that include employee expectations? Are those similar or different as well? And what's the CX impact there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of ways it's very similar from employee expectations. So, I mean, in my consulting, I work with a lot of brands and cutting across not just CX but also the EX space. And very often we find there is a parallel between the two. So, as we all know, right, the new generation, the millennials, Generation Z, one of the common traits that we see, they are born in an age where digital is become native. It's a generation where they're expecting at an instant, and that's what we call instant gratification age that they live in. So that has translated tremendously in their behavior in the day-to-day the lives. So it translates to the expectation to goods and services that they consume.
Yeah, absolutely. I have my sister is a senior in college, her doing her undergraduate, and so we're about 18 years in between us, so I can certainly identify with with your comments there. So I know we've been collectively living through this last year of COVID-19. And certainly we've seen tremendous impacts, acceleration of digital transformation. Greg's back, so I want to bring him back in. Hey, Greg.
Hi, everyone.
In what ways have you seen? How has COVID-19 shaped CX in the Asia Pacific region? Anil, let me start with you on this one.
All right. So, see, what the pandemic did was to bring in a significant amount of uncertainty and stress to the lives of consumers, because you don't know what's happening, you don't know when it'll end, and all that. Now, when uncertainty and stress comes in, the first impact on CX is customers want things simple. They want they don't want you to create surprises. They don't want you to make things complex. They want dependability, reliability, and simplicity. So these three things, because that gives them comfort, and then coupled with that is trust. So what we've seen in the last year or so is that customers are increasingly short on patience. They, like I said, they really don't want friction in their interaction with brands and organizations and touch points, and they really want to engage with brands who they feel they can trust, and that's been a huge shift.
Yeah. Francis, would love your thoughts on this as well. What are you seeing related to COVID-19 impacts?
Digital transformation has been very active, as we can see in particularly last 7 years to 10 years. But the COVID year has actually brought a higher, if you like, a higher rate of digital adoption. So this is the first thing that I see, that yes, that the entire pace of how companies, individuals adopt technologies in many ways to collaborate, to work from home, and adopting just simply even the video conferencing tools. Some of the even senior executives have never been meddled with that. And then I even heard stories of some of them really struggle when they're home alone without the PAs around to help that. Now, the second thing I noticed is also about adaptation. That's a good thing, really. People begin to realize that what wasn't possible, it is possible now in COVID-19, where, for example, they need to travel a certain amount of time and frequencies to get certain things done, or the certain processes take certain time. And they thought that, oh, since I'm not coming to the office, it's not going to happen. It's going to happen that fast. But they were wrong. In fact, some have proven so wrong that they realized that there was a lot of good outcome coming from the being forced to work in a certain manner, like work from home, adopting certain technologies. So I find the second point about adaptation is very high, and that's a very good outcome coming from the period.
Yeah. This point about adaptation, and it's I'm thinking about the role of CX professionals. We've always served as these cross-functional connectors in organizations. How can CX professionals continue to play a role in helping their organizations manage the pace of this disruptive change? What are your thoughts on that? Anil, do you want to take to Craig? Greg, love your thoughts as well. Bring you in.
I want to jump in there for a moment, because I think that there's probably two large things that CX professionals can do in that situation. One, and I'm going to come back and speak to it a little more. Actually, I'm going to ask him to speak to it. Is that CX professionals can play the role of the canary. They can look at the data that is coming in across all of the different functions and all of the different spaces, and begin to recognize trends. Because when you're looking at something from one place, people being concerned about a delivery time, for example, you may not realize that it's a systematic outcome of something that has happened in another area. So one is playing that role of the foresight, looking across the organization and noticing the trends. The second is playing the role of the organizer or the catalyst, and that is to bring together the different parts. It won't solve a problem if marketing is not connecting with sales, or if you're not connecting with your delivery space down the road. What makes CX work is that one holistic function and outcome of saying what will make our customers happy and what will keep their path smooth. So CX professionals really can play that role of looking at the data and having the insights and then working with people to take action on those insights. And as we're talking about the pandemic and using the word canary, I want to call on Dr. Anil because he's involved in a really interesting project that takes that and implements it outside of organizations for a very specific pandemic solution.
Yeah. So, it's a very interesting thing that you mentioned, Greg, of this whole thing of the CX professionals being like an early warning system. So there are two parts to this. So the CX professional represents the customer within the enterprise. Similarly, the CX professional also has to figure out how to alleviate or take away pain of his colleagues within the enterprise. And specifically, I refer to a study that we had done a little while back. And in that study, another two things came up is that business leaders are looking on how to reduce cost of acquisition of customers and reducing cost to serve. And if a CX professional can somehow play a role in these two business outcomes, then they gain a lot of traction within internally, and therefore they become a voice of credibility, and therefore their role as a catalyst, as a yellow canary, as a canary becomes that much more powerful. And that's really what I've seen over the last few months. CX professionals who've been able to do that, I think, have gained tremendous credibility within their enterprises and therefore played that role of a catalyst very well.
So let's go ahead and follow that thread for a moment. You and I both used the word yellow canary. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and the gift that you've given back to the world?
Right. So this is it's a project that we came up during the pandemic. We said everybody's in lockdown, especially the elder citizenry, and we said emotional well-being is a very, very huge concern. And we said we'd come up with a solution where using our neuroscience background, we actually created a framework where people could assess their emotional framework, their emotional well-being while sitting at home. And based on that, we could see that data and then decide to route them to a counselor, route them to a maybe a serious professional if the problem was more acute. And this was something that was very well used across multiple geographies. A lot of people got there, and you could see where your emotional well-being is as we tracked across the lockdown. So I think it was quite interesting to do that, and it was quite interesting to see the impact of emotional well-being on people during the lockdown, especially people who lived alone, people who are, like I said, the elderly. And the assessment is very simple. You could do it on your own. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a simple thing that all of us can relate to. Customer experience is complicated and it requires a professional and the right resources and the right team. But what you're talking about is sort of thinking about that capacity and applying it to a very simple problem and saying, okay, we can automate, we can use artificial intelligence, we can use neuroscience, and we can connect people with the right counselors who will help them get their
Absolutely,
solution.
yeah.
So that was a really cool project. Thank you for doing that.
Kudos, Neil. Anil, I love hearing about that. That's amazing. I know, we've sort of been talking about the future. I want to stay on that topic. What do you see as the greatest challenge and opportunity as you think about the future of CX in the region? No, that's a big question. So, who wants to take that one first? Francis, you want to take that one first? Greatest challenge and opportunity.
I guess I could connect the previous question with this one because making the point that there is a very strong association between business goals and customer outcomes. Meaning that everyone should be able to see that most businesses, in fact, if not all, primarily exist to serve their customers, right? So, therefore, in order to achieve their business goals, they have to be very clear the outcomes they want, and every outcome can almost link to the central customer centricity that we talk about. Now, the CX professionals and the CX business executives within an organization play a very difficult role. Like I think Greg mentioned, complicated. It is difficult and complicated because you are playing such a huge role in coordinating the entire company together, from operations to sales, marketing, and you name it, if to the point that every single employee in the company, in the organization, has a role to play in the outcome of the customers. The problem and the challenges I see is that very often either the organization or the individuals fail to see the connection between his job, his task for that day, that hour, linked to the outcome of the customers, which essentially it does. You can be a driver, you can be a salesperson, whatever you do, you have to know the outcome that you want to achieve for the customer. And with that knowledge and understanding, then work becomes very meaningful. And then also together they can achieve the coordinated outcome.
Yeah. So I love that. And so do you see a role for, the CX professional to help, the employees within their organization, create those meaningful connections to understanding how their work connects to customer outcomes?
No, absolutely. That's why we in the Asia Pacific, just like most regions, begin to see a lot of CX professionals coming out, spring up in many cities. There is a huge elevation of visibility, if you like, in particularly some industry like financial services, hospitality, and also retail. We see that a lot of companies are investing into people, businesses, into tools, softwares, to make sure that they fully understand leveraging on data, to make sure that they get their customers, they make sure that they understand the customer journey and getting the outcome that they want for their customers.
Yeah. So great, seeing that growth in CX professionals and investment in CX technology as well. Anil, I want to come back to you and ask about, you've seen a tremendous amount of growth in CX in India over the last year, and as we've been partnering with Terragni to grow CX in the region. So, what are you most excited about as you look forward to continuing to grow CX and to continuing to grow CXPA India network?
So, like I mentioned a little while back, there is no one India. There are multiple Indias, and it's very interesting that people who are on the outside of India don't see that, because they look at, let's say, a GE or a Mercedes-Benz, and they believe that, that's how customer experience is done. So there's an India that lives in villages. And then there is an India that drives S-class Mercedes. So there are multiple Indias. And what's fascinating is that each of these Indias requires customer experience. They're demanding better experience, but in different nuances, at different levels, and different ways of garnering that experience. So what excites me is that we've just at the tip of the proverbial iceberg. This is really the beginning of what I see a significant hockey stick growth, both in consumers demanding great experience and professionals fulfilling that demand. But with a caveat. If you approach India just like how you approach any other market, you're bound to fail in providing experience, because it is very important to understand the context of the customer and to design an experience that is profitable in that context, right? And this is a very difficult one to crack, and that's something that I think I should make that point.
Yeah, I think this brings us back to one of the reasons we're so excited about what is happening in India and what's happening in Asia Pacific. Because I think if it's bad to consider there to be one India, that's probably just as bad to consider that there's one Asia Pacific. And so, what I really like is sort of this awareness that in the long run, the old approach of creating one go-to-market strategy, or a go-to-market strategy based on a limited number of personas, it was better than what came before, but it's not good enough. Where we need to go to the future is to understand the nuances between the different market segments and to be able to think about how we get closer to that. I think that the term that brought it up first was one-to-one future, with Peppers. Really to think about that personalization, really to think about the context of that customer. But, as you say, Dr. Anil, I think that's a really important question. It's not just about meeting that customer's needs. It's about meeting the business's needs as well, and the business outcomes. So I kind of want to throw that question to Dr. Francis. Francis, what do we need to be thinking about to make sure that we're getting the business outcomes in addition to happy customers?
I guess there are a few steps that the individuals or the organization need to take. First, often we always like to start with the mindset stage, the ability to understand what is possible. That's critical. Like I mentioned earlier, in the COVID period, a lot of people didn't think or understand that they could do certain tasks even at a certain speed. A year later, you can hear them saying, "Look, I'm a change agent right now. I didn't think it was possible, and I didn't know that I could do this or do that." So the adaptation is key. So first, the first step I think is mindset. The second is the ability to understand linking strategy to execution. What that means will be they need to absolutely understand the outcome that they want to achieve, and then link that to the goals that they have. And customer experience is central core to that process. And third will be training the people, having the right people and tools and processes to make sure that everything roll out smoothly. So it's a three-step process in my opinion.
Yeah, I have a point here. One of my or one of the challenges that I see for CX professionals is not enough of them understand how to read a profit and loss account. They're not familiar with how a business is run. Most of them actually have come either from quality or from the from a call center background, or maybe from a marketing background. And one of the things I would urge most all CX professionals to do is learn how to understand how a business is run and what are the pain points of the business, because that's when you get a seat at the high table, and I think that's really one skill that CX professionals need to really scale upon.
100%. When people think, I think way too often, customer experience professionals think that their outcome is simply to increase the NPS score, or increase CSAT, or to take care of the things that are within, their own control. And that's not it at all. The objective is to mobilize the organization, is to work across the different spots. Really, really proud to let people know that CXPA will be announcing a project within the next 2 weeks to do research, to help document how a CX professional works together with the sales team, how they work together with engineering, how they work together with finance, and how they work together with HR, because we need to understand those pieces. We all can agree how important employee experience is. That doesn't mean that the customer experience team should be issuing the paychecks. We need
Absolutely.
to figure out how to work with the HR directors to make that happen.
Yeah. Because if that doesn't happen, Greg, what we run the danger of happening is CX professionals will forever be seen as support teams. They will not be seen as core to the business. And if that happens, you'll always be at the mercy of somebody else for your budgets, for your initiatives, for your leadership. Yeah. And that is a serious problem I'm seeing today in many organizations.
Yeah. One question, Anil. So what advice would you give to CX professionals, short of going back to school and getting your MBA? How can they work within their organizations to better understand how can they can be more effective when they're with their senior leaders in terms of driving these changes?
A great question, Gabe. And I'll go back to what Greg mentioned. Firstly, they need to get out of the mindset that their life stops at an NPS score. That's the first serious change that they need to make in their own heads. The second thing is, they should grab an opportunity to work with the business on a project. For example, a new product is being launched. They should actually get involved as part of the new product team, go out to the dealers, go to the marketplaces, along with the sales guys, and figure out what is that touch point providing as an experience? How does the entire customer journey happen to close a sale? How do I reduce the time to sell? That's what an experienced professional needs to figure out. Not say, okay, you guys go and come back, and then I'll take some insights from customers and I'll map a customer journey and I'll measure the NPS at the end of the day and put it in the boardroom. That's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, I heard relentless focus on organizational KPIs and how CX ties to that. That's great. Greg, you were going to say something there?
I was going to say, Francis, you look like you had something to add.
Yeah, in fact, we were just talking about challenges. And I'm thinking like this. We have echoed the point that CX professionals, CX leadership has to bind the entire organization together, right? Now, one of the things, an observation, I would like to see the chief customer officer to be directly reporting to the C-suite, high up in the hierarchy, because this is absolutely important for someone to have that authority and to be able to gather, harness, and align people all together, because CX is an umbrella that cuts across the entire organization. So we really need to have that position, the person, the agenda high up in the C-suites level. We want to make sure that we have the right people, and it's also, we want to make sure that the investments, it's a board level discussion every time. Whenever they measure a CEO about profit and loss and about branding, the whole conversation should be also about how customers are providing their connection and connectivity to achieve those goals.
Yeah. It's a great point, and in my experience, and I'm curious if this aligns with your observation, but when you don't have the C-level representation, you get pockets of buy-in. You maybe get a few leaders who understand CX and the business impact and are bought in, but then you have other things happening in this other area over here that is working at cross purposes with your CX work. Is that kind of?
I think this is very much, what Anil referenced in passing, which is the fear of becoming a support space. And when we think about support tends to be reactive. It takes direction from or other parts of the organization. You can't be a canary for your organization if you're being reactive. The whole point is to have foresight. It's to have that catalyst function. It's to look across the organization and be proactive. Now with that said,
Greg, support is often seen as a cost center, whereas CX should be a profit center. Absolutely a profit center, because the customers are paying the bill, right?
And I was thinking about that. If we could pare down our effort and spend our money and our time and our resources on the things that matter to our customers and eliminate the cost of things that don't matter to our customers, that's where we'll really drive, success. And so to Anil's point, if we go out to that on-site sales appointment, the CX professional that goes needs to really be looking and being attuned to two things. One, what does the customer want and not want? How can we tweak this to make this better for the customer? But the second is, what is needed by that salesperson in order to be successful? And then design and craft something that is not just about a better NPS score, but is also about the business results. So it's really saying we have to be better about thinking about our teammates, thinking about the business outcomes.
Some of our best projects have been with organizations where the CX function is also held by, for example, the chief operating officer. One of our best customers today, one of the world's largest insurance companies, the chief operating officer is also the head of CX. Brilliant move. And it's therefore so focused on the business outcome that leads back to customer experience that they always have a say in how the business is run. And to me, that's brilliant. On the other hand, I've also seen organizations where the CX function is reporting to marketing, who's reporting to somebody else, who's reporting to the board. And then therefore all CX projects are seen as vanity projects or luxury projects. Because the CX guy just doesn't have a clue on how the business is run.
One example I heard was even better, was the CX is driven by the chief transformation officer. So, with the word, right, this guy, he is been designated to drive outcome, transforming the entire company. And I think CX is really transformational. If a company get it right, they really be really doing well, right?
Yeah. Agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you both a question, because we've got viewers who are all over the world, some who may work in the Asia Pacific region, others who may not. So let me ask both of you, what's something that you would want someone who's not working in the region to know about, either how CX is practiced there or to know about customers in the region that they may not know?
Well, if you look at good customer experience, to my mind at least, starts with good context of the customer, and good context comes from good insights. And in India, when you run insights, you have to be prepared to run insights on scale, and you have to be prepared to run insights, like I said, at multiple levels of literacy, geography, language. To give an example, when we did a project for one of a very large crop chemical company in India, we did it for farmers, and we ran an insight study for 200,000 farmers in 9 languages, right? That is the scale. So, so anybody who's not worked in India should understand the complexity and scale of what you need to get insights. And that really is a differentiation.
Yeah. Francis, what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess for the audience who are not in Asia Pacific, there are a couple of areas where perhaps I could see a little bit more active here, if lack of a better word. One is the I mentioned earlier in the call was the speed, the kind of the rate of change is extremely fast over here. Particularly as you can see, what's so fascinating is happening in China. The adoption of the technology by the common people, how to use data, how to use video analytics on an everyday life and social media. It's astoundingly at a very fast rate. The second is a level of innovation as well. Of course, we have the top major cities of innovation is well spread across the world, in fact, quite evenly spread. But I do see that there will be a continuous trend in Asia where there will be a lot of focus among the B2G governments, even B2B. In accelerating their investments in that area. So for Asia Pacific and linking back to CX, it really drives home because innovation, having new solutions is very tantamount, basic, important strategy for businesses to thrive, or in fact for sustainability, and even that for them to stay afloat and stay alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Greg.
So I want to go a slightly different direction. And I know both of you have had experience with this. And I know a lot of the folks that are thinking from India and Asia Pacific are probably curious. And this is to talk a little bit about career opportunities. And in specific, I'm curious on two fronts. One, how is customer experience developing and growing as a discipline and opportunity for people who are working in country? And what are the opportunities for people to work or represent or support international multinational companies that are looking to expand in India and Asia Pacific? What's sort of the state of affairs? Yeah.
Should I go first?
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Edward.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. To the first part of your question, Greg, there is tremendous opportunity. There is a dire need for professionals who are in the CX space, and there will always be an opportunity. So I think that's a growth story. India is a growth story. Very, very bullish about India's growth story. So we'll always be short of good professionals in this space. So that's the first thing. On the second thing, if you were to ask me if somebody were to look at how to support a multinational, find a good partner. You have to find somebody that you can partner with who understands the nuances locally. Otherwise, you'll be, I think, stuck.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And two great partners here. Francis, your thoughts?
I think for this, in fact, I was asked this question incidentally very recently by a group of professionals in this region, where a lot of them are transitioning from their current roles to future roles and undergoing a lot of training. Most of the training are sponsored by the government to provide them with the transition opportunities of new skills. So one of so that question came up, and I said, and then I responded is first of all, it would be helpful and extremely useful to get a certification. So like, Agile practitioners, they have IC Agile, design thinking, you have their own various certification, and having a CCXP would provide the discipline for in terms of their investment of their time, the seriousness to get that themselves certified is basically a beginning of a career track. That's one. The second one is having a CX certification, or a sort of like you want to be a CX professional, you can not just work only as a CX role specifically. There are a lot of roles that are parallel in conjunction, the marketing role, sales role, and as we all talk about, CX pulls everyone together. So having a CX experience and CX capability skill sets can put you into many roles, parallel roles across the organization. And finally, to Anil's point, I agree that you could need to continuously learn from one another, from other CX professionals around the world. That's the reason why we are so excited about building the network across Asia.
Yeah. Thank you, Francis, for that. And I think that's a really natural transition. And Greg, I want to bring this question to you, because we can't talk about careers without talking about community. So, what's most exciting to you as you think about building a stronger CX community in the region?
Yeah, what I think is exciting about this partnership and about CXPA's strategy as a whole is that we want to create a very large tent so that people can get what they need for where they are in their exploration and career journey. So we are committed that any person who is interested in connecting and learning about customer experience is welcome to visit cxpa.org, create a free account, and affiliate and network with the peers in the Asia Pacific region, the India region, or any of our 60 networks throughout the world. So that's the first step. But we recognize that there are people who want to go higher and want to go further, people that want to take their professional career to the point where they are supported and desirable as not only a CX fan, but as a CX leader. And those are folks that choose to become CXPA members so that they have the benefit of access to all of the resources, to share their thought leadership on our blog, to earn their CCXP. That's the opportunity for somebody to raise their hand and say, I am not just a CX fan, I am a CX professional. And I want to have that opportunity to lead. So I'm excited about that. But the reason that I'm really excited is something that Anil said earlier, which is to say, if you're an organization that thinks that you're just going to, come into India and treat India as one unique, country, your strategy is going to fail. And so our strategy is to find talented, respected partners that operate in India, that operate in Asia Pacific, and to say, tell us what topics your community wants to hear. Tell us the local stories that we should be featuring, and let's marry that up with what we're seeing globally. So that's our place in our strategy. So I'd love to hear, not to put you on the spot, but what steps and topics and spaces do you see as next steps in India, Anil?
So when you say topics, are you talking about broad themes in which where CX is going to move, or topics for knowledge discussions? What?
In terms of what sort of webinar topics and what sort of activities do you see coming down the road that will come out of this part?
Right. So Greg and Gabe, I've always been very passionate about CX from India for India, and therefore, we have the series of 4 webinars that we are going to be doing this year. The first, of course, so in India, one of the things is very clear focus on linking business outcomes and customer experience, especially because we're just coming back on the back of a very tough year. So every leadership out there wants to see, okay, how am I going to move the needle on revenue? How am I going to move the needle on savings? So that's going to be our first webinar, and then we're going to follow it up with a few other ones. The other one is other area is brands with a purpose, or CX with a purpose, right? So purpose-driven customer experience, because again, consumers are looking to brands that they trust. And trust comes when you exhibit purpose beyond just making money, right? So there are some excellent brands out there that are exhibiting purpose to a larger civic sense, to a larger societal responsibility, and providing great customer experience at the same time. So how do we showcase those stories? That's one part. And to everybody listening in, watch this space, CXPA and Terragni, and we're going to do something very interesting to actually nurture and feature stories from India and professionals from India in the coming few months. So, Greg, I just want to put that teaser out there. So I think there's some very interesting stuff that we've all cooked up, which we shall reveal as time goes by.
Yeah. I love that. We are, almost exactly 1 year in on our partnership, together. And we've got a CXPA network that's online at cxpa.org/India network. That's growing. The webinars are well attended. And I love, people need to create that account and tune in, because this next step for the India network is really going to help bring a new degree of recognition and opportunity for CX professionals. So there we have where we are about a year in. Francis, we're just getting started. We're getting ready to do sort of our kickoff. This is sort of our kickoff. And so talk a little bit about what you see happening in CXPA Asia Pacific as we move forward this year.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about the partnership between CXPA and Hehsed. I'm also very privileged to have the opportunity to bring and develop and establish the network across the major cities. Now, we're going to have our first CXPA Asia Pacific webinar on the 10th of March in the Asia Pacific time in the afternoon, where we're going to have a good panel of speakers. Actually, one from London, one from Australia, two in Singapore. And Greg, you're going to be there. You're going to open the session as well. And thanks for staying up late, by the way. So it's going to be great having representation across the globe for a Asia Pacific event, is to signify that it's really an important and agenda for everyone. It's important enough that it's on everybody's mind. Now, so the three areas that I think there will be a great opportunity, which also part of the area where I'm focusing in helping clients, are first is CX innovation, helping clients to find ways to innovate new product solution, particularly driven from customer centricity, what customers really want. The second one is about measurement. Is an age-old problem to have. If you can't measure, it doesn't exist. So we are going to help clients a lot in understanding, translating the outcome to what they can measure, to the metrics that mean to everyone at different level. It's pretty complicated because of the metrics, right? You have different roles, different levels, different scope, and all this plays out. So it's going to be, although it's complicated, but it can be done. And finally is using data. A lot of other organizations are sitting on data. We want to help customers to find the right data at the right point in time, creating information and insights of those data that can feed into their CX strategy and getting the outcome they want.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Very exciting, gentlemen. I want to close with one question. We've talked a lot about what CX professionals need to know, what they need to learn to be more effective in their roles, and we know that one of the great things about CX, it's a continuous learning journey. So tell me, what's one thing that you're trying to learn more about right now, related to CX or just more broadly? What are you reading up on? Who wants to go first? Anil,
Francis, you want to go first?
Francis?
Okay. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the fact that customer satisfaction, customer experience has largely been quite reactive. And the reason we've been reactive is because that's the nature of the beast. But I think technology, artificial intelligence has the potential for us to be proactive and therefore bring in a new paradigm for experience. For example, when your laptop is going to fail and it sends a signal, it sends a message to the manufacturer saying that there's an error that's coming up, and they send somebody to fix it even before you know it, right? That is great experience because the customer is not expecting it. And I think that's the next shift in customer experience, where you actually anticipate a challenge for a customer and set it right, as opposed to the customer calling you and you then setting it right and providing him a wow moment. So to me, that's a really fascinating area. And how do you bring in technology? How do you bring in self-learning algorithms and actually start providing an experience to the customer where you fix and address a customer's challenges before even the customer knows it. And Tesla's really done it very well, because it basically tells the company what's going to go wrong with your car even before you know it. And I think this is what's going to happen to most of the stuff that we deal with in life. And for me, that's a fascinating next step for customer experience. How do we become more proactive as opposed to being reactive?
Yeah. Great insights. What are your thoughts, Francis?
Yeah, so I'm reading up a lot on ROX, return on experience, which is pretty new, and it came up in our panel discussion just last week. But specifically around three areas of ROX, I'm really particularly interested in researching on. First of all, is the impact on loyalty of the customers. The second is linked to the internal stakeholder commitment, in because we need to make sure that internal stakeholders and leadership are driving, because customers, we are organizations are organized vertically, but customers sees you all horizontally. Finally, the third one is linking RX to innovation, finding new ways and processes to delight our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Gentlemen, Greg, I want to go to you if you have any final thoughts
Yeah,
before I close
no,
this out.
I mean, to me, as Francis was speaking earlier, he mentioned the word quality, and I can't think of quality without thinking of W. Edwards Deming and the total quality movement, which, while Deming was American, he accelerated that movement in his thinking by his work in Japan. And so I'm hoping that this American organization will find some great acceleration as we grow and learn in the Asia Pacific region. But more broadly, what I'm really interested in understanding at the moment is, where did customer experience come from? What are the different academic threads? What are the different business unit threads that have fed into the customer experience discipline and development? And what can that tell us about what we need to do better than the roots that came before us? How do we make sure that we understand how customer experience is taught, what the definitions are, and how it is related to other business ventures and other business units? That will help us be better partners throughout the organization, be better stewards of the discipline, and create a better future for our customers and for our organizations.
That's an extremely important point, Greg. And in fact, it slipped my mind. But one of the things that CXPA can actually champion is to drive academic grounding for customer experience, because customer experience as an entire field is very light on academic research oriented thinking. So if you look at the number of research papers or white papers that are academically inclined, where serious research is done, CX is as a function is very light, as opposed to, say, behavior science or neuroscience or any of the science that you look at. Customer experience is still light, and I think one of the things that we spoke about, that initiative that we spoke about coming out from India, is one of the reasons is that we really want to look at how do you actually accelerate that, because it may seem arcane and academic, but it helps business at a very firm footing at a later stage, and I think that's very important.
Yep, that's 100% right on. And right now, Francis, I know that you teach at a university. Thank you for that. If our viewers know of colleges and universities that offer courses and programs in customer experience, we'd love to hear about that. We've set up a collection space at cxpa.org/higher-ed. What we've found so far is that, there's over 50 colleges and universities that are teaching customer experience around the globe. I think there's 17 different countries reflected at present. But to paint that in that broad scope is sort of back to Anil's point, is to say India. And there's a lot of difference, and so we need to go in and we need to understand, and then we need to also get into that underlying academic space. There's so much to learn. And so I'm so excited to be on this journey together.
Greg, there is so much to learn. I'm learned from all of you during this hour. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your energy, and thank you for your excitement. We're excited to partner with you and advance CX in the Asia Pacific region.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Awesome.
Much.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
So, speaking of energy and excitement, we've got a great deal of energy and excitement around our upcoming broadcasts. So we hope that you will join us next Monday, March 8th at 10 a.m. Eastern. We're going to be doing a special Live with CXPA broadcast celebrating women in CX leadership. So that's a panel where I'm excited to say we'll have a guest host. Crystal Montague, CCXP, will facilitate a really awesome panel of women who are CX leaders in their organization. We've got a global panel for that one. We hope you'll join us. On March 16th, we'll be talking with CX professionals in Latin America about the state of CX in their countries. On March 23rd, I'm really excited to have a conversation with CXPA recognized training provider Daniel Ord, CCXP, about his experiences building a customer-centric culture at a telecoms community, facilitating over 60 workshops over a 2-year period. So you want to check that one out. And then we're rounding out March. On March 30th, we'll be joined by Bruno Guimarães in Brazil to discuss CX in Brazil and our newly formed Brazil CXPA network. So hope you'll join us next week. And for all those broadcasts, until then, hope you have a great week.